My name is Julieth, and I'm going to talk about the foster care system and how private foster care agencies exploit the foster care system in order to make profit. They do this by locating children in inadequate homes, by disregarding the children's well-being in order to make profit. Also by using federal compensation to make profit. So much of the foster care system is private as a result of a preventive political philosophy from the 1980s, where they thought that the private sector would have better results in taking care of these children at a lower cost than the government. So in order to reduce prices, they delegated a lot of the tasks to these private companies. They receive fees from state and local governments for its services. So these companies, as I mentioned, they place children in inadequate homes. 5 out of 6 children taken from their parents are placed in foster homes operated by, managed by these private agencies, instead of being placed with a relative, which they have a higher chance of succeeding. Also, in these homes where they place them, most of the times, since in order to reduce costs and make profit, they will accept any foster parent willing to foster for money to pay. They pay them a really low amount and they foster. Most of these foster parents are unfit. They're not just, that's the case of Alexandra Hill, a 2-year-old girl from Texas that was taken from her father because he smoked marijuana in front of her in a room. The private foster care agency Mentor placed Alexandra with a foster family and Cheryl Small, a convicted felon, and her husband was a recovering crack addict. Mentor did not do a background check. If not, they would have easily found out that they had a criminal record. Most of these agencies, in order to make profit, reduce any type of legal cost in order to make more money. So, unfortunately, Alexandra was sent to the hospital with a fractured skull and was taken off life support and died. And her foster mother was charged for murder and was sentenced to life prison. Because of the company wanting to make money out of these children, they're willing to avoid certain regulations, like monitoring. There's real inadequate monitoring of these homes that the state requires. They will assign these social workers that they hire many children and the social workers, in order to keep their jobs, will sometimes be very lenient and not report everything that they should. So this ends in the foster care private agencies disregarding the children's well-being in order to make profit. Let alone foster care systems lack an adequate education. Over 34% of foster care youth have experienced 5 or more school changes in foster care. This also affects their social skills. They also lack adequate social skills because these foster companies, they just want to keep them in the system in order to make more money. That they don't care what school they're going to. They don't care about their education. Only 1% of foster youth are able to go to college and actually graduate. This is from data from the National Study of Child and Adolescent Well-Being. So preoccupied with cashing in on these children, these agencies will ignore all common signs. According to an LA Times analysis, more than 1 million hotline investigation, those living in homes run by private agencies are about a third more likely to be victims of serious physical, emotional, sexual abuse than children in state-supervised foster families. Foster care children lack health care because these companies, they won't like I mentioned, in order to make more profit, they reduce all legal costs. They try to water down their services. So foster children will not get the adequate care that they need. In essence, private foster care agencies may profit out of federal compensation, and they will misuse the public funds intended for the children in order to make money and charge lots of money for their services. As the case of Teens Happy Home, who auditors discovered had bought beer and cigarettes with public funds. It was billed. And it billed the state and the country more than $100,000 worth of care that it did not provide, according to a report from the LA Times. Not stopping at private agencies, they are also notorious for claiming federal resources belonging to foster children in order to boost profit. So once a child is in their possession, they have legal right to acquire and sign up as the payee of the child in case, like for example, of a disabled child from foster care. Most of the times they are eligible for Social Security. These foster care agencies will sign up as their payee, and they will receive the money from that child's Social Security. And the majority of the time, the child never sees the money and is never invested in him. And I hope I was able to shine a light in an ongoing problem, and whenever you guys see a proposition regarding affecting foster care, you may take a look at it and see, because it's not just one company. It's many private companies that have been caught doing these schemes and investing in the stock market and at the cost of these children. Thank
Well, the subject is clear. The proposition is phrased like a question. You're going to show us how foster care is exploiting this. Get rid of the how. Make a declarative sentence. Let's have an argument, not turn this into an informative speech. You need a preview, and you need to structure this material a lot more than you've got here. There is some interesting information in the speech that I think you cite. There's some interesting information in the speech that you don't cite, and there are a whole bunch of claims that you make that don't have any evidence to support them at all. So you've got a mix of what it is you're trying to accomplish. And I think you could probably take the stuff that you have and put there you are, and put it together a little bit more clearly to make the argument that you've got. I think the argument is clearer than when we were talking about it before, and you definitely have an argument here, but it needs to be structured and build a little bit more, because it just feels like you're all over the place, and you make a lot of claims about the foster care system that you don't provide any evidence for, but then you do make some claims that you do provide evidence for, and I think that's the thing that you need to do. You need to take the stuff that you've got the evidence for and use that to build those arguments up. And then, even if the other arguments don't have a lot of grounds, you could at least maybe reasonably infer that some of those other things are true, but I still think you'd want to find some better evidence on those particular points. So that kids, the best information that you had with the clearest citation was the stuff from the LA Times that talked about the kids who are living in these particular kinds of homes, and half of them are more, or 1/3 of them, they're more likely to be injured or harmed or something like that. That clearly applies to the argument that you're talking about. So that evidence I thought worked pretty well. The information that said 5 of 6 get put into these homes, I didn't get a source on that. The example that you had a couple of examples of people who were being abused. That's definitely an interesting example. It's compelling that we're talking about that it's related to the notion that the companies are trying to save money. I don't know that that's true. That seems like a big inference that they did. They clearly didn't do it in a background check, but did they not do the background check because somebody was just an idiot, or did they not do the background check because they don't pay for background checks? That's where I think you need some of that kind of information to connect those points that you've got here. Like I said, I think there's information here that's really useful to the argument that you're making, but it gets kind of spread out and not focused on particular claims, and so you need to do a little bit better about that. I think you're pretty passionate about the point of view that you're talking about. I like that. I like the fact that you're talking to us for the most part. You really look at us when you're engaging in this, but like I said, I think maybe the absence of a structure is one of the reasons that you can get away with doing that. At the end, you make it sound like there's some proposition that people might vote. I've never heard of a proposition on the ballot that deals with the foster care issue. If there's a general legislation that's about this and you want us to support it, that's okay, but it's really not a policy argument that you want to talk about. You just want to convince us that the system that has for-profit groups participating in the foster care system creates an inherent conflict of interest. It creates problems for the kids, and it leaves them less protected than they're supposed to be. That's what your argument is, and let's keep it simple and direct that way. All right, thank you.